Despite what the popular may say and tell you, if you want relationship success, compromise and sacrifice is something that you both need. And I'm not here to shun anybody, but I'm here to give you feedback on the facts about sacrificing and compromising in relationships, because some people aren't really helping you build longevity in your relationship. If you want to learn more, stick around with your girl Angie and let's talk love. So recently I was asked in a private conversation to discuss my thoughts on sacrifice and compromise. And apparently there was a podcast where some young women were talking about it, and I asked my thoughts. And before I even heard the podcast, I gave my initial thoughts, but as I got off the phone, I did my own research to understand exactly what it is they were saying. So I want to read the quote from what we're going to be talking about today and give some real facts on compromise and sacrifice from a veteran young millennial married woman. So the quote read, "In relationships, you cannot do more compromising. Sacrifice is okay. I don't feel like compromise is. Sacrifice is something you willingly do. Compromise is something that you were forced kinda into. You are accepting something that you normally wouldn't accept. It's like, I don't want to have kids and now I'm having kids because you do, and I really never wanted children. And I fully have compromised. I don't like you. If I'm doing that much compromising, I don't like you. There is someone out there that you don't have to compromise with. If we were not dating, would I be your friend? It's like, I don't want to have kids and now I'm having kids because you do, and I really never wanted children. And I fully have compromised. I don't like you. If I'm doing that much compromising, I don't like you. There is someone out there that you don't have to compromise with. If we were not dating, would I be your friend? People really," and then it goes on to say some things that have nothing to do with what I am going to be talking about today. And the whole statement, honestly, it sounds like pure selfishness, and this is not realistic advice to take from somebody. Sacrifice is what will start the relationship, but compromise is what's going to keep your relationship. And I'm going to break everything down for you. In order to understand this, I want to first talk about sacrifice and break down the definition of sacrifice. And according to the dictionary, it is an act of giving up something valued for the sake of something more regarded as important or worthy. And naturally, when you get married to your partner, they become most important. Like, they become above your family, they become above your friends, and scripture tells us that marriage is honorable above all. So when you get married, there are a lot of things that comes on the back burner, because now your marriage is one, and the Bible tells us that again in somewhere in Genesis, I think it is, or Mark, the twain becomes one flesh, and you leave mother and father and cleave to your husband, etc., etc. So we know that marriage truly is honorable above all things. And so there are certain things, like I was saying, that you'll have to put on the back burner for them, i.e., which is sacrifice. For example, in a new relationship, you may sacrifice time with your friends in order to get to know this person that you're in a relationship with. Obviously, that's something that you have to do if you want to learn who you're with, if you want to have longevity in your relationship, etc., etc. You have to sacrifice your time. There's some things, okay, I can't go out with you this Friday, girlfriend, but next Friday I can, because I'm trying to get to know this person that I ultimately want to end up in a relationship with. And I read somewhere, it said, a healthy relationship will never require you to sacrifice your friends. And to a degree, I understand this, or to a degree, I don't. I agree and disagree with this, and only because if you go on, have a trip planned with your significant other, and your husband or wife gets sick, right, and they need you, a good partner is going to tend to their significant other. Your first responsibility is to your partner. So that trip that you had so desired, that you value, because your significant other is sick and they're more valuable than that trip, a good partner is going to stay home and take care of their partner. They're going to sacrifice that trip. However, I do understand this in the sense, and I think it should be rephrased to say, healthy relationships shouldn't always require you to sacrifice your friends. And the reason why I say it shouldn't always require you to sacrifice your friends is because you should have boundaries, especially when you first start out dating with somebody. There's certain things that there's different levels to relationships. Some things you'll do married that you won't do dating. And I think that's a key component that people miss when they're talking about these things is there's levels to everything. It's different stages of relationships that you go through to continue to build upon. And that's why it's not good to skip steps. Like I said, everything is not for the dating period, and the sacrifices while you're dating is going to look differently than the sacrifices when you get married. It's going to just elevate. And what I'm getting at here is all your eggs shouldn't be placed in this one person when you're dating and you're sacrificing, right? You don't want to keep shunning your friends and your family for this particular person all the time. You want to have some personal time. You want to have some boundaries. You want to have some space. And additionally, that whole quote could mean that your significant other will not make you choose between the two. Now, that is not healthy. Personal time is a good thing, and ultimatums is never, or having a partner that's making you choose between two things is never a good sign of longevity, because that can turn into like manipulation and control and things that you don't want for your relationship. I want to explain something also that should have been broken down in this particular episode with the people that were talking about this, is the fact that there's a difference between healthy compromises or healthy sacrifices and unhealthy sacrifices. And healthy sacrifices are like how much time and effort you put into a relationship. You know, at some point you're going to have to move differently if you want relationship success. You're going to have to sacrifice your time to get to know this person. It's a given. But then there are unhealthy sacrifices, and those look like your boundaries, your morals, your values, your belief, things like that. You should not be sacrificing what you believe, your morals, what you value, just to be in a relationship or just to say that you're in a relationship. That's not a healthy sacrifice. And sometimes I did an episode a while back about this. Sometimes I honestly feel like we do, unbeknownst to ourselves, we sacrifice certain things about ourselves when we first get into a relationship, where we're kind of putting on this facade of, the good girl or the good guy, everybody's on their best behavior, and we're kind of, not being real with ourselves. And I want to say that sacrifice is about you. I want people to remember that sacrifice is mostly about you. A sacrifice is more something that you are doing as opposed to it involving another person to do it. And I think they were correct in making that statement, but I don't agree with the selfishness behind it, because it came off as long as I'm doing it, it's fine. But if you're telling me that we need to do this, then that's where I have the problem. If we have to keep doing it your way, then that's where the problem lies. And I want to help people understand that that's not good thinking, and that sometimes people, although they can be used interchangeably, sometimes they can't be. And so I wanted to just break this down further so people can understand that you need both, and it's not a bad thing to have both in your relationship. It was pure selfishness, that statement, and just how I listened to it, and then I read it, and then it was pure selfishness. But what sent me with that whole statement was, there is someone out there that you won't have to compromise for. And this is what really sent me into a frenzy. I want to explain something to you. This is absolutely the worst advice I have ever heard in my life. I feel like that statement sets people up, especially the impressionable, to believe that compromise is a negative thing. And that statement was truly pure ignorance. Compromise is not some challenging activity that you shouldn't do. That's not what compromise is. Compromise is still a choice you're making. So they talked about, it's kind of being forced, right? It's still a choice you're making. You're making the choice to sacrifice. You're making the choice to compromise. You're making the choice to show compassion and do all these things. Nobody is forcing you to do anything. You don't have to do none of that. Now, you might not be in a relationship for long, but nobody is forcing you to do anything. It just is what it is. Now, they were saying in a relationship how they feel that, that they, like I said, that they're compromise is being forced. And there's a difference in being forced and then being willing to do what's beneficial for the relationship. And I feel like compromise, and I'm going to explain that in a minute, that compromise is doing what's beneficial for the relationship. When you're doing something that's beneficial for the relationship, you're the two that's coming to that conclusion. So it's going to be beneficial for you. So let's talk about compromise, and compromise being for the benefit of the relationship and how it's about bettering the relationship. And when you start looking at compromise as something that is beneficial for you, that's when it comes off great instead of like a daunting task that means you won't get what you want. You know what I mean? Or you'll be able to hold a relationship for a long period and succeed when you start thinking about compromise in the sense of, this is going to benefit me in the end. And if you feel like them and you feel like you're being forced into doing something, you probably are being manipulated, and you probably shouldn't be with that person, because like I said, compromise is never forced. It's something that, and I'm getting ready to explain that, it's an agreement per the dictionary, an agreement or settlement, meaning you aren't forcing anything. You are coming to an agreement or settlement about something. So it's an agreement or settlement of a dispute that is reached by each side making concessions. Okay? Y'all heard that. Y'all heard that because I got loud. Here is the key word with this: each side. Meaning it takes two people. It's going to take two people to come to a compromise, as opposed to the sacrifice, which is something that you particularly did on your own, right? So now we have this thing where we don't want to communicate. We don't want to come up with things with our partner because we feel like it's not something that we want to do. We don't have good communication skills now to sit down and talk about this. And when I was thinking about this just now, I thought about how people lack relational skills and the desire to learn how to compromise effectively. And instead of just saying that, they tell you that, or imply that compromise is undesirable. It's not something that you should be doing all the time in your relationship. Wrong approach, wrong advice to take from anybody. I'm telling you guys from experience, this is not advice that you want to take and that you want to listen to. Compromise is very much necessary. The thing about this is, this generation, after millennials, even some millennials, and after Gen Z, I don't even know, Gen Z, Gen X, whatever it is, it's a selfish generation. It's a lazy generation. And that's why the dating scene is a nightmare. That's why relationships aren't working out, because you have this mindset of, oh, I can get what I want. I don't need to compromise. And then you're telling other people on your large platform that, okay, don't compromise, or you shouldn't be compromising all the time. This is totally wrong. You need both in your relationship, despite what the popular people may tell you. You need to make sacrifices, and you're going to have to make compromises. And the reason is simple, is because you and your partner are not going to agree on everything. You guys are not going to just have all this kumbaya moment all the time where you're like, okay, yes, I agree. It's never going to be that way. It's never going to be that way. You're going to not have differences. You're going to have difference of opinions, ways of thinking, ways of doing things. And you need compromise, right, to come to that agreement, which means each side is going to have to make some concessions. It's necessary, as I'm going to keep saying in this podcast today, to compromise. Compromise is really the ultimate way of conflict management, right? If I think, me and my husband, we sit down for our budget meeting, and I think we should be saving $500 a month, and he is just adamant that we need to be saving $1,000 a month, we don't agree. Now, we know that finances is one of those top causes of divorce, so we need to come to some kind of agreement. We need to come to some kind of understanding, meaning we need to meet in the middle. Okay, maybe we should do $750, maybe $600. The point is that both of us is not going to get what we want. I'm not going to get that 500 and he's not going to get that 1,000. Nobody's being forced. It's just meeting each other in the middle and coming to a common ground of what's appropriate. Ultimately, what I'm saying is you come to resolution, you come to solutions by way of compromise. How well are you compromising as a couple? Here's the thing, guys. You won't always get what you want. And people that have never been married, people that don't have long-lasting relationships, they're going to keep you single and miserable for the rest of your life by telling you compromise should not be happening all the time in your relationship. Decisions are made every single day. And when you're married, you're making decisions with your significant other. It's not just about you when you're married. You have to constantly think about this person. And if you're not ready for that, that's fine. You don't need to be married. You don't need to be in a relationship if you still have that selfish spirit. I'm not here to shun anybody who is being selfish individually, but when you get into a relationship and you have that selfish attitude, that's just flat out wrong. You know, when I was thinking about not getting what you want all the time in a relationship and compromising, I first thought about, why would you even want to be in a relationship with anybody anyway that doesn't help you or challenge you in some way or make you think outside the box? And I feel like when you're compromising, you're hearing somebody's perspective, you're hearing somebody's other side. So why would you want to be with somebody that doesn't give you that oomph to make you think, oh wait, this may be a more excellent way, or wow, that is a better idea, or ooh, we should be doing it this way. You should want that. You should want somebody whose ideas that you respect, whose ideas that you love, whose ideas that you can really resonate with and be like, wait a minute, hold up. 650, 700 might be good to compromise because it could give us, a little extra money to go out to eat this Friday or whatever the case may be. Now, again, too many people don't want to sit down, and this is the problem. Too many people don't want to sit down and come up with alternatives, right? Because it's going to require a conversation. It's going to require us to talk it out. It's going to require those concessions that this selfish generation does not want to make. And that's the key problem. People just want what they want. It's not about hearing perspective. It's not about hearing alternatives. What's more beneficial for the relationship? What's going to benefit us in the long run? Shoot, that extra money might help us out in it. And just like there are healthy and unhealthy sacrifices, there are healthy and unhealthy compromises as well. I think if it involves an ultimatum, it's not a healthy compromise to make. Your partner should not be making you, like I said earlier, should not be making you choose between two things. I'm watching a show on Hulu right now. It's called Reasonable Doubt. I actually think it's on ABC, but I'm watching on Hulu. And I think the guy gave his wife an ultimatum because she's a lawyer, and I think she was working a lot, if I can remember this correctly. She was working a lot. And so he gave her an ultimatum basically, or what she felt as though was an ultimatum: your job or your family. If your partner is making you choose between something, then you definitely have the wrong partner. I think there is a conversation that needs to be had and a willingness to hear this other person's perspective. And perhaps that's what they were missing and why they separated. And a true compromise would be an understanding between the two parties of, okay, I know you're a lawyer. I know your job is demanding. I know you have stuff to do. But when you come in this house, that job stays on the outside of the door. And when you come in this house, you're present. To me, that's a good middle ground, a good mutual understanding. Leave your work where it's at. And when you get home, you're present with your family. You're present with your kids. Now, truth moment, sometimes it's not going to be that easy. Sometimes it's going to be some major disagreements because, again, effort has to take place. Desire must be there. And a lot of people are in relationships with people that they're not willing to do this thing called compromise with, which goes against the original statement of what she was saying. She said, if I have to compromise, I don't like you. And here's the thing, that's quote too. That's probably why compromise, like I was getting at, is hard for some people, because they don't really like who they are with. It's a hard thing to compromise with somebody that you don't like, that you don't have a desire to be with, that you don't see a future with. When you find the person that you like, when you find the person that you love, compromise will be manageable. It'll be something that's just a part of your journey. It'll become natural to you. All right, babe, let's sit down and talk about this, because you have this way of doing things. I have this way of doing things. How can we meet in the middle for the benefit of us? You can't do that with somebody that you don't like. It just is what it is. And I don't want to talk badly about women and their perspectives. I don't want people to get that idea with this podcast that I'm being like hard on women or whatever the case may be, or the women of these podcasts. But I've been married since I was 18 years old. Trust me when I tell you, I've done sacrifice moving to Georgia with my husband. When I didn't really know anything about Georgia, but church and stuff like that. And I've compromised. It's just a part of the relationship right now, where you're just constantly making compromises to better the relationship. Sometimes, it's most of the time, actually, majority of the time, the compromises that we make are helping us learn each other better. They're helping us grow together. They're helping us learn how to communicate with one another. They're helping us be better individuals for each other when we can sit down and come to a kumbaya moment and get what we need to do done. The problem is we're choosing partners that we're not equally yoked with. And what I mean by equally yoked with, we're not choosing partners that we share the same morals and values with, causing this compromise to be a huge issue for us. You're going to have a hard time compromising with somebody when you don't share the same values with them, when you don't share the same beliefs with them. The additional problem to this is the lack of proper foundation. There are so many people not talking about the things that they should be talking about. Like, logistics is important. How many kids do you want to have? Where are we going to live? Where do you see yourself in the future? The logistics of life are so important to discuss in your relationship to prevent you from having major blow-ups, and not lasting in your relationship, solely because you're not talking about the important things. Now, yes, of course things change over time, but we're talking about the real problem here. That's a conversation for another day, change and growth. We're talking about the real problem here of people not being equally yoked, people not doing the groundwork in their relationship to cause them to think that compromise is just some negative activity that is just like has a scarlet letter on it or whatever the case may be. People are getting into these relationships because this person solely meets their fantasy list. And when you have this fantasy list of everything that's right with the person, and your person is not a realistic list, and you're blinded by this fantasy list because they meet all these things that you wanted, and so you're not asking the real questions to make compromise easier for you in the future. Again, like I was saying earlier, compromise is what built our relationship. Over time, it helped me learn why my husband sees things the way that he does, why he thinks the way that he does, why he acts the way he does, and how to move forward together. It's not a bad thing. When you compromise, you have to communicate, and you're only building your communication skills. And when you communicate, if you do it right, you are understanding. You are building understanding with your significant other. Compromise is truly a journey to self-discovery, discovery of your maturity level and the respect that you have for your partner. You have to respect them to listen to their side, to share your side in the right tone, and then come to some type of resolution. You have to have that respect for that person. And I want to say to all the ladies, to all the gentlemen, compromise is a part of conflict management and resolution. And if you don't have conflict management and resolution in your relationship, you are not going to go the distance. So don't let anybody convince you or make you think that you don't need it in your relationship, because you definitely do, and there's benefits to it, like I expressed in this episode. I'm Angie Roll, the teen wife that turned my struggles into strength, marital woes into wins, and made the mistakes so you don't have to. I'll see you guys all next week as we talk about relationship advice from the unexperienced.